Yeah, so this is an interesting article at Breitbart. Breitbart has in many ways been a mouthpiece for the Trump campaign. So why is Breitbart running um, an article where Vicente Fox is upholding the virtues of NAFTA? That would seem to signal that Trump is going to reverse his position on trade. Or at the very least, that there's a lot of people that are pushing for him to. It's predictable. It's been predictable for a little while. Um, at this point, I would not have a lot of confidence in Trump holding to his anti-trade positions. Um, that's a part of the hubris of being a Republican, is that you've got to accept the trade, you know. But what is the right approach now that the topic has presented itself? I've said this before. What Mexico needs to do is get its labor standards up. It needs more regulation. It needs higher wages. That's the actual ideal here, okay, rather than ripping NAFTA up. It's getting Mexico up to code. If Mexico had comparable wages, standards, and regulations to the United States and Canada, they wouldn't have this labor advantage, and other factors would determine where the factories end up. There's a legitimate level of moral outrage over the idea that the comparative advantage is a race to the bottom. I'm no fan of market logic or competitive economies, but you get a lot less pushback if the competitive aspect was over who was better and not who was worse. For that reason, this issue is never going to go away. You can throw as many skewed statistics around as you want. You're ultimately not addressing the actual issue. Okay? It may be true that, trade has increased since NAFTA came in. But people that are opposed to NAFTA don't care. That's not their argument. Okay? Their argument is that this is a race to the bottom. There's more trade but lower wages. They want a system that rewards excellence, not a system that, rewards bad labor standards. The statistics don't matter. It's a moral question, right? And it's a question of quality of life. If somebody told you that slavery increased trade, would that justify it? It wouldn't, would it? And, frankly, it's not that far from a reasonable comparison. I'm an anarchist. I don't really see a big difference between chattel slavery and wage slavery. And you can get mad, I don't care. But, and when you start talking about really, really low wages, that is, okay? And honest people recognize that. So, would you make the argument? Well, people did make the argument, right? History doesn't look back kindly on them. Now, on the one hand, the argument was always that NAFTA would pull them up to code. On the other hand, everybody always knew that was bullshit. That the point of NAFTA was for the corporations to escape the code. Enough time has now passed to make the following conclusion. If the purpose of NAFTA was to pull Mexico up to code, then it's failed. There's been some progress, sure, but not enough. And this should be the focus from the next president, and perhaps the president after that. So the way this should work is like this. The president should put some demands down on the Mexican political system and provide it with a timetable to meet those demands. I'm not proposing anything onerous, okay? Only that Mexico bring itself up to code, that it's the same standards that the United States and Canada has, so that there's an even playing field across the three countries. Should it meet those demands, NAFTA can stay. Should it reject them, NAFTA must end. But I want to be clear that I don't think the failure here is at a legislative level. Okay? It's not something you should ever expect any president or any parliament to pass. Okay? And nobody seriously ought to expect that a parliament will pass these kinds of laws without pressure from below. I know that Mexico has a history of labor repression, but newsflash, so does the United States. And in fact, so does Canada. There may be a difference of scale, but why has Mexican labor not risen up and demanded more? Where are the Mexican consumer watchdog groups? Where is the Mexican left? Now, if you know a little bit about the way the Mexican state works, you can answer that question, right? It's bogged down in bureaucracy, but I think the major error that's come out of NAFTA is that the American left has not funded the Mexican left. That's the answer. and it's mind-boggling to me that it hasn't been done. Okay, the AFL-CIO should be sending tons of money to Mexico to fund sit-down strikes, okay, to fund walkouts, in order to get things back up. Now, I know that the Mexican legal system can be brutal. Okay, I know that the system is very corrupt. It's crony from the top down, okay? But you don't fix it unless you fight back. And there needs to be solidarity, okay? That's the great success of NAFTA from the capitalist perspective, is that they found a way to get Mexican workers fighting against American workers. And that rhetoric it's entrenched on the left, and that's why we've lost. Okay, that's why the left lost, because instead of building solidarity across these groups and working together, okay, they bought into it and they saw each other as competitors and they fought against each other. If they all work together, they can increase Mexican living standards. And once they do that, then there's nothing to fear from free trade. In fact, it's very progressive to have open trade, open borders, if the standards are comparable. I think that the bottom line is that they've had enough time to get this sorted out. Okay, you can know it's bullshit, okay, but you don't need to have that argument anymore. You don't have to argue that it's bullshit, okay? You can, allow the facade and conclude that it failed, okay? It should have been sorted out by now. They should have increased their labor standards by now. They haven't. Maybe they can't, but it's not happening either way, okay? So it needs to be, pressure or bust. They need the pressure from the outside, hard pressure, under serious consequences. The abolition of NAFTA would really hurt Mexico at this point, okay? And so there's a lot of leverage there to force the Mexican government to better its standards. And if they won't do that, then the agreement must be abolished. Now, what's the likelihood of getting a president in place that's going to think like that? Almost zero. It's the right approach. It'll never happen. The real solution is to get money from the wealthier American unions to funnel it into Mexico and organize. But that itself is the American left has become, or the American Union movement has been totally, it's become a bourgeois system, right? The union movement in Mexico might be bureaucratized and very difficult to work within, but the union movement in the United States is bourgeois, okay? And they're fat and lazy. It's the truth. That's why everything was taken from them, because they were too fat and lazy to fight. You don't have to like that, okay? But you should bloody well accept it. It might be the only real answer, okay? But I don't think that looking at the American Union movement and looking for action there is truly going to be any more fruitful than looking at the Mexican one. The strongest union movement, the strongest left, is actually in Canada. But can we generate sufficient funds? Can we radicalize movements in the States? This is not getting better unless workers fight, and that organization has to happen, right? But I mean, what should the president do? That's what it should do. Whether it's likely to happen